Welcome everyone back to the Pommy and Oz Show. Today what we're doing is what you always enjoy this time of year. We're going to do a way too early ladder prediction. We're going to do it really raw, really live. Two reasons. One, I'd like a break from editing. It's been really tough this couple of weeks learning new things and trying to make the videos a little bit more high content for you guys and girls, which the feedback has been remarkable. And the second bit is I just like having a bit of fun here. And this is really linking up with the videos that we're going to do. A bit of a channel update just before we get into the nitty-gritty of the video. We are going to start doing some just daily news recaps as well for you. Some real nice short videos for you to keep you updated with that. You've really had the feedback on that and you've really enjoyed them type of videos. And also we'll be starting up the lives as of next week as well for you. So stay tuned for them. Some notifications where we'll sit back, chillax and chat football. But without any further ado, let's run that intro, get straight into it. So here we are then, we have the famous ladder predictor on Squiggle, and we're going to have a lot of conversations here just around like the things that I'm selecting. We've got a few videos coming up where you've saw I've got the risers that went up last week. I've just recorded and scripted the final couple where we've categorised them into 3 bits. So we'll give you a little bit of a preview of that here, but Brisbane definitely one of the contenders. They're going to begin their campaign. Let's go with a cheeky 16-point win. Sydney versus Hawthorn. This is going to be a fascinating one at the SCG. I think that Sydney will come out strong. Dean Cox's first game will go with a 15. Then we go over to Gold Coast. Gold Coast are definitely one of them teams that I'm a wait and see on. I don't know what you guys and girls are, but you know what? I'm going to tip with my brain here, not my heart. I reckon Essendon might start off just with a shock win. And then at the Sydney Showground, you know what? This is no bias. I think GWS will come in. I reckon they'll win a tight one. I've got a feeling Carlton are going to be, Collingwood are going to be real tight games this year. Carlton at the G against Richmond. If they don't win this, you know what? Question marks will be asked. Let's go with a cheeky 24-point win. Hawthorn versus Essendon at the G. Hawthorn will get off to a flyer. Fremantle were definitely one of them teams I'm looking at, but Geelong and Melbourne for me are two of the most untalked teams in the land at the minute. I will think Fremantle are going to rise, but I'm going to go with a Geelong win here. Repeat of the granny. I'm going to go here, Brisbane win that. I reckon Brisbane will just keep them little seeds of doubt in there. The Doggies are a real interesting case at North Melbourne. I'm going to go with the Doggies. Collingwood versus Port. I think Collingwood too big, too strong. Port are one of my fallers this year. The Crows versus St Kilda at the AO. I think the Crows will get off to a winning start. Melbourne versus GWS at the G. This is a fascinating one. I think GWS will start at home very strong, but I feel like Melbourne may win that one. Eagles versus Gold Coast. I think Gold Coast will win that. Carlton versus Hawthorn at the G. Carlton's first test. And I think it's going to be youth versus a system of Carlton. I'm going to go with Hawthorn winning that one. The Dogs versus Collingwood. I'm going to give the Collingwood a win there. Essendon versus Adelaide at the G. You know what? I'm going to book the trend here. I'm going to give Adelaide this win. Port versus Richmond at the AO. Should be a win there. The Docklands, GWS versus St Kilda. St Kilda versus Geelong. Very tough start for St Kilda. I'm going to go with a win for Geelong. Brisbane, no-brainer. North Melbourne versus Melbourne. I think that I think this is going to be it, but I think that they'll win quite a few games. I reckon this will be the first coming of age of Fremantle here. And Essendon versus Port will go with... You know what? We'll go there. Carlton versus the Dogs. I reckon Carlton always match up well with them. A narrow win for them. Melbourne versus Gold Coast. I'm going to go with Melbourne. St Kilda versus Richmond. Should be a Saints win. Hawthorn versus GWS. Out in the middle of nowhere. Ooh, this is going to be an interesting one. You know what? I think Hawthorn are going to fluctuate this year a little bit in the early games. AO, I'm going to go with Adelaide. Eagles versus Fremantle. This is a really intriguing one, isn't it? But Fremantle will win that one. Collingwood versus Carlton. I think this year Carlton and Collingwood will break even in games. So I'm going to give us the first win and look at that one. Geelong versus Melbourne. we'll go, it's Cardinia, so it's that. Gold Coast here, I think, will just start. I reckon Adelaide come out of the blocks early. Richmond at the G versus Brisbane. This is a chance for them, but I am going to go with the champions there. North versus Sydney at the Docklands. I reckon Sydney will start getting on track here. Gold Coast, GWS versus West Coast. That should be a no-brainer. At the AO, you know what? St Kilda do pretty well out there in recent times. They make it close, but Fremantle, I think, are going to be pretty much unbeaten at home. Geelong, I'm going to go narrow win. At the AO, so we are in gather round now. Collingwood versus Sydney. I'm going to make Collingwood win there. I reckon North here will get their first win of the season. Carlton should absolutely pepper them. This will be a really intriguing battle, and I think the Dogs will win that one. Melbourne versus Essendon at the AO. I think Melbourne will get that win. Richmond versus Fremantle at Barossa. We'll go with the Freo. And St Kilda, GWS. I reckon St Kilda may surprise people here and get that win. Port Adelaide versus Hawthorn at the AO. We'll go with Hawthorn. And then at the Gabbatron, Brisbane host Collingwood will go there. Carlton should beat North Melbourne, and Essendon should get the win there. Melbourne versus Fremantle, real intriguing battle, this one. I'm going to go with Melbourne at home. Adelaide versus GWS, we'll go with GWS. Richmond versus Gold Coast at the Docklands. I'm going to give Richmond their first win here as we're a few games in at round 6. Sydney versus Port, what an intriguing encounter. Sydney will win this one. The Doggies versus Saints. You know what? I reckon Saints might get that win. Geelong versus Hawthorn. This is always a ripper. And I'm going to go with just the changing of the guard. I reckon Geelong are going to really stagger their season. Richmond, Melbourne will go with them. Collingwood, Essendon will go with Collingwood. Fremantle, Adelaide at Perth Stadium. You know what? I'm going to... oh, no, we'll go there. St Kilda, Brisbane. We'll go Brisbane, and Port versus North at the AO. We'll go with Port. GWS, Doggies at the Manuka. I'm going to go with GWS here. Gold Coast versus Sydney. We'll go with Sydney. And Carlton versus Geelong at the G. I'm going to go with Geelong here. I think Carlton will try and learn from recent years of not having a hot start, not having a hot end, and try and be a little bit consistent. Hawthorn versus West Coast at the Docklands. Hawthorn should win that. Essendon versus North at the Docklands. You know what? I'm going to surprise people here. I reckon they'll get on a little bit of a run North towards the start of the year in some games. St Kilda versus Fremantle at the Docklands. I'm going to give St Kilda a very tight win. Doggies versus Port. I'm going to give the Doggies it at Eureka. Adelaide Oval, we know Carlton can't win at Adelaide until recently. I'm going to go with Adelaide. Collingwood versus Geelong at the G. This should be a ripper, and I'm going to give Collingwood a tight win. Dan Houston masterclass. West Coast versus Melbourne. We're going to go with Melbourne. Sydney versus GWS. We're going to go Sydney to just keep their noisy neighbours quiet. Hawthorn versus Richmond. This should be a ripping game. And Brisbane versus Gold Coast. I'm going to give a surprise win here at the Gabba. Coming of age for them. Fremantle, slight win there. Carlton at the G. Always match up well. I think at the G, Carlton will like just the wider ground. Melbourne versus Hawthorn. We're going to go with Hawks. And Essendon versus Sydney. We're going to go at the Docklands. You know what? A shock 1 point Essendon win. Gold Coast versus the Dogs. I'm going to go Gold Coast with a solid win. Port versus Adelaide. For some reason, I always like Port in these showdowns. That's going to be interesting. Richmond versus West Coast at the G. I'm going to go with Richmond and Geelong, GWS, Cardinia. I'm going to go Geelong. So round 9, North Melbourne, Brisbane. We're going to give Brisbane the win. And Gold Coast versus Hawthorn. We're going to go with a slight Hawthorn win. Sydney, Carlton, this will be a tough one. But Sydney seem to have the match there. And Collingwood, Adelaide will go there. This is a fascinating game, isn't it? Port in this stage here at the AO, and I'm going to give the Port Power that win. GWS Fremantle at the showground. GWS, I've got them going on a run at this stage. The Dogs versus Essendon will go the Doggies. Richmond versus North. This will be an intriguing one. I'm going to go at North Melbourne. Brisbane versus Melbourne at the Gabba. Perth Stadium. St Kilda. I'm going to go St Kilda just. Cardinia Park here. It's always tough at Cardinia, isn't it? Essendon versus Richmond. We'll go Essendon. Carlton at the Docklands. Just think it's going to be so inconsistent at times from Carlton. Hawthorn versus Brizzy at the G. Top of the table class. We'll go Hawks. North Melbourne Pies will go the Pies. Fremantle versus Port at the Power at Perth Stadium. Adelaide versus West Coast will give Adelaide the win. Melbourne versus Sydney. You know what? This is where Sydney start hitting their straps now. St Kilda Gold Coast at the Docklands. You know what? I reckon they're going to start travelling a bit better, Gold Coast, this year. Brisbane Essendon. Should be Brisbane. Collingwood at Hawthorn. This will be a ripper, but I'm going to give Hawthorn the win here. Gold Coast Freo. That should be an intriguing one. I reckon they're going to just make a little bit of a fortress at Gold Coast, is my gut. GWS Richmond. GWS should win that one. Sydney Adelaide at the AO. Always tough to beat them there. Traeger Park, St Kilda Melbourne. This is an absolute ripping tie, isn't it? You know what? I reckon some injuries might hit Melbourne towards the mid part. West Coast versus Geelong. I think Geelong. West Coast and Bulldogs versus Hawks. This should be a fascinating tie. You know what? I'm going to give the Dogs here just that little impetus there. Brisbane at the AO. I'm going to go Brisbane by 10. Richmond Sydney. We'll go Sydney. Geelong Gold Coast. GWS Port. This is a great game, isn't it? At the Manuka. North Melbourne West Coast. At the Hands Oval. What a wonderful position. You know what? I've got 4 wins for them. Carlton will beat Essendon. Collingwood Melbourne. This will be an absolute ripping tie. You know what? Collingwood will win that. St Kilda, the Dogs. This could be a great game. I reckon the Dogs will just be too big, too strong. At York Park in Tasmania, it's hard to look past them. Brisbane GWS. You know what? GWS start to buck the trend here. Essendon Geelong. I reckon Essendon might just sneak that one. Perth Stadium. We'll go with Fremantle. Port versus Melbourne. We'll give Port that one. Carlton should win that one at a canter. Fremantle Essendon. This will be a great game. We'll go with that. Brisbane Geelong. We're going to give Geelong the win there. Carlton should batter North Melbourne. Port Adelaide Sydney. What a game this could be. To keep their finals hopes alive. At the Docklands, Collingwood St Kilda will go Collingwood. GWS Gold Coast. What a game. At the Sydney Showground. Western Bulldogs versus Richmond. This could be an intriguing one, but we'll go with the Dogs. Collingwood West Coast. I think West Coast are going to struggle. Adelaide at the G, Richmond. Ooh, we'll go with Adelaide. Gold Coast, Melbourne. This could be an intriguing one, but I do really think Melbourne are going to be strong. The Dogs versus Sydney. I reckon they'll be in a little bit of a canter here, but we'll give them that. You know what? Tasmania Hawthorn. This could be an intriguing one. You know what? I'm going to do something shocking. I reckon Old Hunting Ground, Alistair Clarkson gets the Roos up. Port Carlton. Carlton needing to win at the AO, and I reckon they will. A character-building win. Fremantle St Kilda. This could be a ripper, couldn't it? Geelong Richmond. We'll go Geelong. St Kilda Hawthorn. You know what? St Kilda. Little bit of a spurt here. The Doggies will win that. Essendon Gold Coast. We'll go Essendon. Collingwood. So we broke even. I can't remember who we had. Did we have Carlton winning the first one? We'll go Collingwood winning the second one. Sydney versus Fremantle at the SCG. We'll go Sydney. Brisbane versus Port will go Brisbane. Adelaide versus Melbourne in what will be a great game. Adelaide winning that. We'll go GWS. GWS versus Geelong at the Sydney Showground. This could be a ripping fixture. Dogs versus Adelaide in what is a crunch tie, and Adelaide sneak towards finals. St Kilda at the Docklands will put the shock in. Docklands count and make up for it, and they come back. Melbourne versus North. We'll go Melbourne. Essendon, Richmond. We'll go Essendon. Gold Coast will give Collingwood that one. Port versus West Coast at the AO. Fremantle, Hawthorn will go Freo, and Geelong, St Kilda will go Geelong. Essendon, GWS. You know what? We'll give Essendon that. Carlton versus Melbourne. Always a close one, isn't it? We'll go Carlton by a point. Collingwood versus Fremantle. This should be a rip. You know what? I'm going to go Fremantle out of the skies. Sydney, North, Sydney. Brisbane will win that one. Hawthorn versus Port. What a game, Hawthorn. Adelaide versus Gold Coast at the AO. We'll go Adelaide. And Eagles get their first win on the board versus Sydney. GWS Sydney, again, I'm going to go Sydney. And North Melbourne Geelong will go Geelong. St Kilda Melbourne, this is a ripping game, isn't it? And you know what? I'm going to give St Kilda that one. The Essendon versus Dogs. Shock Dogs win. Collingwood will win that. Carlton versus Hawthorn at the G. This will be a ripping game. I'm going to give Hawthorn that win. I just don't trust Carlton versus that spread. Gold Coast versus the Lions in what could be a great tie and a big win for them. AO Port Adelaide. I'm going to go Adelaide. Fremantle should win that one. Geelong versus Port. St Kilda versus North. St Kilda. Melbourne will beat them. Ooh, Dogs. You know what? Dogs. GWS. I think GWS will be too strong, but we've got to have some shocks along the way. Collingwood versus Brisbane. Brisbane dominate there. Show them they're back at the G. Gold Coast Richmond in what will be a great tie. Sydney versus Essendon. Sydney. Adelaide versus Hawthorn. You know what? I'm going to give Adelaide that, and they sneak in. Carlton versus Fremantle. Perth. They always play well there. I feel like I've gone with my heart there. Geelong versus Essendon. This could be a cracking tie. GWS versus North. GWS. Carlton, Gold Coast cementing their final spot. Richmond versus St Kilda. Melbourne versus the Dogs. Big win. Hawthorn will go Hawthorn. Brisbane, Sydney in a repeat. Brisbane win. AO, Fremantle, Port. We'll go Fremantle. Adelaide. We'll go Adelaide. North versus Richmond. What an intriguing fixture. We'll go with North here. Essendon, St Kilda. We'll go Essendon. Dogs versus Eagles. Carlton versus Port at the Docklands. I reckon this will be the end of the season. Carlton will start having a few just little niggles and starting to think for finals. Hawthorn versus Melbourne. I'm going to go with Melbourne. Gold Coast GWS. We'll go with GWS. Sydney versus Geelong at the SCG. We'll go Sydney. Collingwood versus Adelaide at the AO. What will be a ripping tie. I think you're going to have a real narrow win. Fremantle, Brisbane at there. We'll go with them. GWS St Kilda. We'll go with them. North versus Adelaide. We'll go Adelaide. Fremantle at the Docklands. Collingwood versus Melbourne in what will be a crunch tie. Richmond, Geelong. Geelong. Carlton, Essendon. Carlton will get the win. Brisbane versus Hawks. We'll go Brisbane. Port, Gold Coast. We'll go Gold Coast. Eagles, Sydney. Sydney. So that is what we've got, the 8 there. Geelong, Brisbane, GWS, Carlton, Sydney, Collingwood, Hawthorn, Freo. So that is very interesting, I think. That is very interesting. It's real tough to do this just because it's just off the top of the head. I wasn't really thinking too much about that. And it's quite interesting because a lot of the question marks I've got about clubs in the videos coming up, obviously I didn't have them there because I'm not going to spoil it, but there's a couple of teams in the 8 there that I've got some question marks on. Carlton obviously got a real easy fixture at some points there. Melbourne, Adelaide are 2 teams that I really do expect to rise, so I'm surprised that they're there in that terms. But this could be a really interesting one. North with the 6 wins, I think they've got about 4+ in them. West Coast with 1 win, they're probably going to take some points off. But that is a real fascinating one just to do as an exercise. Chat, let me know what you think. We'll do this with some more statistics and stuff like that as the time gets on. Bit of a fun video. Let me know what you think. Peace, love, and light. Pom out. Spent all my life holding